Welcome back to Midnight Whispers. Don't forget to subscribe, turn off the lights, and let's step into something you can't unhear. I remember the day I signed the lease like it was yesterday. Or at least I think I do. Because lately, my memories feel like sand slipping through my fingers, and I can't tell what's real anymore. The apartment looked perfect. Newly painted walls, polished wooden floors, sunlight streaming through large windows that made me feel like I could finally breathe again after months of stress. The landlord, a man in his late 60s with a voice that cracked every few words, told me the place had been vacant for years, but was recently renovated. And though he smiled, something about the way his eyes lingered on me made me feel like I was being studied. But I brushed it off because I needed a fresh start. After moving in, I noticed how eerily quiet the building was. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, but the kind that feels staged, like the world around you is holding its breath. My first night there, I unpacked half my boxes, made tea, and listened to the hum of the refrigerator echo in the empty space. I remember calling my sister that night, but the call kept dropping. And every time I redialed, I'd hear faint static that almost sounded like someone breathing. I laughed it off, thinking it was bad signal. But when I hung up, the apartment felt heavier, like the air itself was denser. By the second day, I realized I couldn't remember what I ate for breakfast, or if I even had any. It didn't bother me much at first. We all forget small things, but the next day it happened again. I couldn't remember where I placed my purse, even though I had just seen it a moment before. I found it in the kitchen sink, soaked with water. I didn't remember putting it there. I started writing little notes to myself, reminders about where I kept things, or what I did during the day, just in case. But soon I began waking up to find my own handwriting altered, like someone else had been writing in my notebook. The letters curved differently. The tone felt unfamiliar. The messages weren't just reminders anymore. Some said things like, "Don't look in the mirror after midnight," and it remembers what you forget. I didn't know who it was supposed to be, but I began to dread nighttime, because that's when the dreams started. Dreams where I'd see my apartment from above, as if I were floating over it, watching myself sleep. And in the corner of the room, something tall and still stood facing the wall, unmoving, silent, but present. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, my heart pounding, and then forget the dream entirely, until a random moment later in the day triggered the memory. By the end of the first week, I realized I hadn't left the apartment once, not even for groceries, yet my fridge kept restocking itself. There was always just enough food to get by, but I couldn't recall buying any of it. Every time I tried to leave, I'd find myself standing back in my living room, keys in hand, shoes on, but with no recollection of how I got back inside. It felt like the apartment was looping me, erasing the parts where I tried to escape, and keeping me trapped in the moments that fed it. I didn't believe in haunted places, but there was no other explanation that made sense, and deep down, I knew I was being consumed, not physically, but mentally, memory by memory, moment by moment. By the second week, I started noticing changes in the layout of the apartment. Small at first, a chair that wasn't where I left it, a picture frame facing the wrong direction, or my toothbrush suddenly replaced with a different color. I thought maybe I was losing my mind, but the photos on my phone confirmed it. Every time I took a picture of the living room or kitchen, the layout looked slightly different from how it appeared in person, like the apartment had its own version of reality that shifted whenever I wasn't paying attention. I began to record videos as proof, but when I played them back, there was no sound, only the faint hum that grew louder each day. It wasn't the fridge or the pipes. It was a low vibration, deep and steady, almost like a heartbeat coming from the walls. I started sleeping less, afraid of losing more memories. But the less I slept, the more disoriented I became. I'd forget what day it was, or wake up in different clothes. I even found my hair wet once, though I hadn't showered, and my reflection started looking delayed, like it was struggling to keep up with my movements. One morning, I woke up to find my notebook missing, replaced by a new one I didn't recognize. The first page had my handwriting, but the message wasn't mine. It said, "Don't fight it. The more you resist, the faster it feeds." I tore the page out and threw the notebook across the room. But that night, I woke up to the sound of pages turning. When I turned on the light, the notebook was open on my nightstand again, flipped to a page that said, "You forgot your mother's face." I rushed to the mirror and tried to picture her, but my mind went blank. I couldn't remember her features, her voice, or even her name for a moment, and I fell to the floor crying, realizing it wasn't just small memories anymore. The apartment was taking people from me, erasing the very essence of who I was. I called my sister again, but when she answered, she sounded distant, like I was talking through a tunnel. She asked who I was and hung up. I stared at my phone for an hour, scrolling through my contacts, but every name looked unfamiliar. The only number that still made sense was the landlord. I called him, and he answered instantly, his voice calm, saying, "You're adjusting. It always happens in the beginning." I screamed at him, demanding answers, but he only said, "Once it takes enough, you'll forget to call." And then the line went dead. I ran to the door, turned the knob, and stepped into the hallway. But instead of the corridor I remembered, there was only another version of my living room, identical, but colder, emptier, like a reflection of the real one. I dropped to my knees, realizing I was trapped inside a maze built from my own fading memories. I stopped keeping track of time because it no longer meant anything. The apartment existed outside of it. Days melted into nights, nights into fragments, and I couldn't tell what was happening anymore. I found myself humming songs I didn't know, cooking meals I didn't remember learning, and waking up in different rooms, even though I never fell asleep there. Sometimes I'd hear footsteps in the next room, but when I checked, it would be empty. Yet the air still carried the warmth of someone who had just been there. I found Polaroid photos under my bed, pictures of me standing in front of my window, staring blankly at the camera. But I never took them. In one photo, there was a second figure behind me, blurry, tall, and pale, its head tilted. I tried burning the photos, but when I woke up, they were pinned to my fridge again, and a new one had been added, me sleeping, taken from the ceiling. I knew I had to leave, but each time I approached the door, my body would freeze, like invisible hands were pressing me back. My vision would go white, and then I'd wake up on the couch hours later. I tried opening the windows, but they wouldn't budge. And when I looked outside, there was nothing, no street, no buildings, just endless fog that seemed alive. I began talking to myself to stay grounded, leaving voice memos on my phone. But the recordings would play back with my voice, saying things I never said, whispering, You asked to forget. You chose this, and you belong here now. I smashed my phone, but the screen lit up on its own that night, displaying the same message over and over. The apartment remembers what you can't. I realized then that the building wasn't haunted in the traditional sense. It was sentient. It thrived on forgotten pieces of me. Every time I lost a memory, it gained strength, feeding, expanding, rewriting itself around me. The walls pulsed faintly, like they were breathing. And sometimes I could hear faint laughter coming from inside them. The sound of my own voice, repeating words I didn't recall saying. I found a mirror I hadn't seen before leaning against the wall. And when I looked into it, the reflection wasn't mine. Her eyes were hollow. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out. Then she smiled faintly, and I heard my own voice whisper in my head, "You're almost gone." I started writing everything down again, desperate to hold onto what little I had left. But each morning, more pages were blank, like the ink itself was being erased. I could feel memories slipping away mid-thought, like someone was reaching into my mind and pulling strings. I forgot my birthday, my job, my hometown, until the only thing I remembered clearly was the apartment itself. Its smell, its texture, its silence. I realized it was becoming my identity, replacing everything else. I tried leaving notes to my future self, taped to the walls, mirrors, even my skin. But each time I blinked, they were gone. One night, I heard the landlord's voice again, not from the phone, but from the walls, saying, "When it forgets you, you'll finally be free." I screamed, asking what that meant, and he said softly, "It can't let go of what you still remember." I understood then. If I forgot everything, I'd disappear completely, and the apartment would release me. But if I kept fighting, I'd be trapped forever. I sat on the floor for hours, thinking about all I'd already lost. And part of me wanted to let go, to surrender, to finally stop remembering pain. But another part of me refused. I wasn't ready to vanish. I wanted to live. I tore through the apartment looking for a way out, breaking mirrors, smashing furniture, screaming until my voice cracked. And then I saw it, behind the bookshelf, a small, almost invisible door. I pulled it open and felt cold air rush over me. Inside was darkness, but deep within it, faint light flickered, like something breathing in the void. I stepped inside, the door closed behind me, the sound echoed like thunder. I walked forward, and the air grew thick, heavy with the smell of dust and iron. And then I saw 1,000 fragments of myself, floating my memories, suspended, glowing faintly. I reached for one, and when I touched it, a flood of sensations returned. My mother's voice, my childhood room, laughter, warmth, all of it. But the apartment trembled, walls cracking, groaning, like it was in pain. I kept grabbing more fragments, stuffing them into my chest like stolen light, until everything around me began collapsing. The last thing I remember was falling backward into blinding white. When I woke up, I was outside, lying on the pavement in front of the building. The sun was out. The street was busy. People walking by as if nothing had happened. I looked up at the apartment complex. It looked ordinary, quiet, untouched. I ran to my car parked nearby and drove for hours, tears streaming down my face. I didn't stop until I reached another city. I stayed in a motel, trying to piece everything together. But when I checked my phone, there were no photos, no call logs, no recordings, like they'd never existed. I went to the police, told them about what happened. But when we returned to the address, the building was gone, replaced by an empty lot with weeds and broken concrete. The officer looked at me like I was insane, said there hadn't been a building there for over a decade. I tried finding the landlord, but the name on my lease didn't exist in any records. Even the paper itself had faded blank, like it had been written in disappearing ink. Over the next few days, I started forgetting again. Not the apartment this time, but my time after. I'd lose hours, then days, waking up in different places with no recollection of how I got there. Sometimes I'd see flickers in mirrors or reflections. My old apartment's walls, just for a second, like it was waiting, calling me back. I threw away everything that reminded me of it, moved constantly. But the forgetting followed me like a shadow. I couldn't escape. Sometimes I'd find new notes in my handwriting saying, "You left something behind." And each time I tried to remember what it was, a sharp pain hit my head and the thought vanished. I think the apartment marked me, like I'm still connected to it somehow. Part of its cycle. Maybe it still feeds off me, even from miles away. I don't know how long I've been running now, but every night before I fall asleep, see that same room, empty and waiting, and deep down, I know someday, when I've forgotten enough, I'll wake up there again. I'm recording this now because I can feel it happening again. The blank spaces between my thoughts are growing longer. My handwriting looks unfamiliar. And sometimes, when I read back what I've written, it feels like someone else's memories, not mine. Last night, I woke up standing in front of a door that shouldn't exist. A small wooden door at the end of my motel hallway. And when I touched it, I heard that same low hum from before, steady and alive. I ran back into my room, locked the door, and sat in silence for hours, waiting for morning. But when I opened my curtains, the view outside wasn't the city. It was my old street, the one with the apartment, perfectly reconstructed. I screamed, threw open the door, and stepped outside. But I was already inside again, standing in my living room, the same air, the same scent, the same faint vibration in the walls. And on the table, there was a new note, written in perfect handwriting. Welcome home. You remembered enough to return. I don't know how to fight it anymore. Every second feels borrowed, and I can't tell if I ever really left, or if that was just another illusion it made me believe. Maybe I never escaped. Maybe I've been here the whole time, writing the same words over and over, thinking they were new. The walls pulse softly around me now, like it's breathing again, and I can feel my mind fading with every beat. I can't remember my name anymore, or who I was before this place. All I know is that the apartment remembers me, even when I don't. And as I write these last words, the room grows darker, quieter, and the pen in my hand moves on its own, finishing the sentence I can't. You were always here,